So how can you own as many 90s dream cars as you want? All right. Hi, YouTube people. This is Aaron. I run the Lone Star Drift YouTube channel. I host drift events, and I've been a car person for a couple decades. I get asked constantly about my cars, my huge collection, how I afford them, how I buy them, stuff like that. I think people have some expectation that I have millions of dollars since I've had more than like 100 to 150 cars in my lifetime, with lots of them being GTRs, Corvettes, 240SXs, M3s, M5s, a Viper, stuff like that. The answer is actually more boring than you might suspect and kind of obvious. So let's start this video. The cars I lust after are cars that are a bit older by today's terms. Stuff like R32 GTRs, M3s, M5s, JZX90 and 100s, cool drift cars, stuff like that. These cars represent the best parts of the golden age of cars that time has kind of already sorted out for us. These cars are the cars we bonded with in video games like Gran Turismo and Forza. We know which ones are already amazing. We know which ones hold value. We know which ones are cheap to maintain. We know all the ones that like tick the boxes that we want. Fun cars, handle well, cool modified engines, sound rad, lots of aftermarket parts, stuff like that. The secret I was talking to, by the way, is the simple fact that most of these cars have already bottomed out their depreciation curve, and most of them are kind of already on the way back up. So if you were to buy a new Civic, you'd immediately lose tens of thousands of dollars off of the $25,000 purchase price if it's a cool one. I don't even know how much cool Civics are, or if they're cool. Anyways, I think the expensive ones like the Type Rs are pretty expensive. But you would lose a bunch right off the top from depreciation. And if you were to go buy an R32 GTR or E36 M3 that was in good shape but not overly modified, you're most likely going to get your entire purchase price back, maybe even a little bit more. That means you could get a new dream car from the 90s or early 2000s every year and flip into a new one and just rotate through all the cars you'd want. And you're constantly going to cycle through them with virtually no depreciation loss and get to own all your dream cars for free. This is one of the reasons I've had so many cars over the last 2 decades. When I buy an E34 M5 because I've always wanted one, I drive it for a year or two, and then I sell it for the same or more money than when I purchased it, and I roll that money into the next car I want. This has allowed me to sample all the cool cars I've ever wanted. The limitations of this method, though, involve staying well within your cash budget if you can, and not buying terrible cars that won't adhere to these principles. This isn't a method to go buy a newer Ferrari that is a depreciation monster and maintenance nightmare. Although if you had the available cash, you could probably easily scale this to buying old, cool, air-cooled Porsches that are really expensive but don't lose value. The main problems with this method are that you can end up with less reliable cars that are not within a warranty like a new BMW or Civic. But the upside is that you'll save so much money and potentially love the cars that you can easily fix whatever problems arise with all that money you save. You might also notice that the older cars have surprisingly low insurance rates, even for an R32 GTR, and are pretty darn cheap to keep up. You can literally buy some of my favorite cars like an E36 M3 for the taxes on a newer car. Let's talk about a few personal examples for this method and how they went for me so you can see where I went right and when I just totally screwed it up and it was terrible. Okay, so number 1, I bought an E34 M5 and drove it for a few years. I purchased it for about $6,000 I think, and I maintained it with just fluid changes and new tires and wheels and some cool little tiny parts. I always had people putting letters on it when I had it parked places, always asking to buy it and stuff. And one day someone finally offered me 10 grand for it, and I randomly took it up because I was kind of bored with the car. This whole car was a really good overall experience, and it worked out well because I got to experience a really neat car in great condition, and it cost me virtually nothing in the end. I'm not really sure I made any money on the whole deal, even though there was a big price difference between selling and buying. But the whole thing, lasted a few years, and I did put some money into it. But it probably didn't cost me anything to own an M5. So it was basically a free M5 rental car for 2 years. I know that this car really wasn't for me in the future, and I'm not going to get another one, but I really don't regret getting one, and I really did enjoy it. Number 2, I purchased an R32 GTR that was stateside legal for under 20 grand and daily drove it for a little while. I didn't love the car, and it made me a bit nervous for some reason owning it, and it kind of caused me anxiety when I drove it. I'm not really an all-wheel drive person, and the car was really slow and not very fun without modifying it, and I didn't really want to modify it, and I figured the car really wasn't for me since I'm a rear-wheel drive nerd, so I sold it for exactly what I had into it for a friend. I lost no money, got to cross another car off my list, my little bucket list of 90s cars, And even though I didn't love owning it, I was happy that I did it and kind of got it out of the way so that I don't lust after R32 GTRs when I see them. I'm not exactly sure what the whole thing about not loving it was, but I think it's just because it was a turbo car that didn't sound like a turbo car, wasn't super exciting, didn't light up the rear tires, and do all the turbo thing turbo cars should do. All right, number 3. I have owned many M3s over the years, and one in particular, my little red E36 M3. It was probably my favorite. It was a great color combo, red exterior with black interior, 4 doors, manual transmission, and it had a peppy ring gear in it, so it was kind of high RPM on the highway, but it accelerated well for a little, old inline-6 M3 that wasn't turbo or anything. Had mild bolt-ons, and it was just really fun to drive. The AC worked great, everything on the car worked. I paid $6,500 for it, I think, and I sold it for a bit more after about 2 years of ownership. And I think I probably broke even on the car, so it was, again, about a 2-year rental car that was free. The car cost almost nothing in maintenance because, those old inline-6 BMWs are really good, and it was a solid car to start with. After another year or so, the owner offered to sell it back to me for $4,000, and I purchased it back, drove it for another year or two, and then I resold it to another friend for roughly the same amount to give him a good deal and have the car go to a close friend so he could enjoy it. And so the car, wouldn't end up somewhere I didn't want it to because I did really like the car. And even though I could have sold it for way more, I really did enjoy, sending it to a friend. All in all, I really liked that car. I drove it for tens of thousands of miles. It was really cheap to maintain, probably one of my best little buys. I didn't make a lot of money or anything on it like that, but I just really enjoyed it, and I would definitely do that car again. I really like E36 M3s. All right, number 4, my JZX 90s and 100s. The story is about the same on that. I've driven these cars and roughly gotten all my money back out of them. They're really fun. I didn't really have many of them for very long except my Ebisu one. My Ebisu one, which I obviously beat on Japan, that's a money pit because I race it and I do stuff. Well, not race, but drift. But I'm always beating on the thing really hard. And it is a drift car. Drift cars are money pits. You understand that when you're drifting. You're not going to get your money back. You're obviously just destroying tires and throwing them away. It's kind of a disaster. But all the ones I didn't drift, they were great. Didn't lose money. Great cars. And they're really fun, too, because they're JZs. And, they make turbo noises. They're way faster than they kind of should be. They're easy to modify. You're not scared of breaking them. Great cars. Okay, number 5. This is where we go dark and evil. This is where things can go horrifically wrong because I bought the wrong car. The easiest thing to say is I bought an FD RX-7 that was about 400 wheel back in 2003. And I can't really be mad at it because I can be mad at it. Basically, this car was too highly modified, made too much horsepower. It was too early in the rotary game and tuning market, so no one really knew much about them. 2 people owned the car kind of back and forth. It was myself and a friend over the course of about a decade. And during this time frame, it blew, I think, 4 or 5 rotary motors, several turbos, 2 built one built LS1 and then another rebuilt LS1 maybe. But it killed maybe 5 to 7 motors. It literally ran for 10 to 20,000 miles in a decade. And I mean, it was just a disaster. There was so much heartbreak over it. There was tens of thousands of dollars lost in this thing. Rotaries can just be kind of a black art, and if you're not good at them, you really should stay away. This thing just lost tons of money and was a disaster. And it was a cool car. It looked cool. I liked it. It's a lie. I didn't like it. I thought I liked it. Anyways, so let's move on. So that was just a disaster. I don't like to just think about bad times in my life like that. So the basic takeaway from this video is pick the car you want and make sure it adheres to the principles laid out in this video. It should be at the end of its depreciation cycle. It should be low on modifications or, you want it as close as possible to stock. 0 rust, and you must understand the car well enough and know that it's a trouble-free platform that isn't going to come back and bite you. That basically means don't get one of the newer twin turbo V8 BMWs, even though they're really cheap and they're big horsepower and all this stuff, because they can be just a disaster. Those have a class action lawsuit against BMW, and while it feels like you're getting this amazing M5 for $9,000 or something like that, the motors are kind of junky and they're crazy expensive to keep up. Just maintenance is a disaster on those things. Okay, next, find and identify the car you want. Try to get it fairly locally so you can closely inspect it. Make sure it's not the cheapest, easiest to find example of the car you want, but a quality car that's devoid of problems like rust or oil leaks you can easily fix, with the correct color combo and everything, so you actually fall in love with the car. If it's not the perfect car for you, don't bother. You won't bond with it. So like, for an example, I bought a 335i recently. I think it was like a year ago. I was turning it into a drift car. Wasn't a great color on the outside. It was a gray leather interior on the inside. It was dingy and kind of gross. Even if we cleaned it up, it still looked, not a color combo I liked at all, because it was kind of a dark, boring blue on the outside and then just like a dark, I guess it was like medium gray on the inside. It just wasn't cool. Regardless of what happened to the car, I didn't like it. I didn't want to take care of it. I didn't care about it. I eventually got rid of it. If that car had been a really cool like white, or maybe the really cool blue that's on the car in a black interior, I probably would have liked it and kept it, and I would have put up with all the problems with it. So just make sure you get something you actually like. That sounds dumb, but the reason I got it was a couple years ago, it was a manual transmission 335i that ran really well, and it was only $4,000, so it was really cheap. But didn't matter because I didn't like it in the end. I wish I would have bought one in a correct color combo and stuff that I liked more for another $1,000 or $2,000. All right, next, use cash if you can and stay within your budget. If your budget doesn't allow you to get an R32 GTR, don't get it. Lower your budget to something that's like an E36 M3. They're great cars. I actually like them more than the R32 GTR, and you can get them really, really cheap. Something that you could daily for, $4,000. I bought multiple E36s for that price range, and they're a great car. Financing isn't something that's going to end the world on this, but it does slow down the process and makes it much less pleasant. And it's not as easy just to go and buy cars in cash and negotiate and everything. So I wouldn't do it. There's cars in budgets, like in all the different budget ranges. Just find something that really works for you. Try to do it in cash. All right, next up, inspect the car in daylight. This sounds so stupid, but for various reasons I've purchased, if I'm going to purchase 100 cars or more in my lifetime, a bunch of them were in the dark, and I made some mistakes because they were in the dark. I've had so many complications because of this, all the way down to not understand the actual color I purchased. That FDR X7 I purchased was Montego blue, but in the dark, it did look kind of blue, and calling it Montego blue, it was just like, okay, cool. I like the car. It looks cool. I bought it. I took it home. I was super busy in life at that time, so I took it home, put it in the garage for a week. Oh, wow, that's cool lightning. Put it in the garage for a week, and after a week, I went in the garage, and I was like, this thing's green. What the heck? And I didn't even enjoy the car after that because I did not like the color, and it was kind of dead to me. This sounds so stupid, but like I've also had problems where there was oil leaks I couldn't see on the cars, maybe a little tiny bit of rust somewhere I couldn't see on the car that, looked really good everywhere else, and there was something hidden somewhere I couldn't see because I just didn't have good enough lighting. Maybe there was bad repairs on the paintwork, just all that kind of stuff. Just try and see it in great lighting, like sunlight is the best. And the price is a bit less important sometimes than you think on a daily driver as opposed to like a race car, because you're trying to find the best condition car with the least amount of problems. And if you're going to go buy a car where all the clear coat's falling off, it could cost a lot of money to fix those problems to make you love the car. And you really do want clear coat on a daily. You really do want working air conditioning. You really do want all these things. And if you're only going to get a few $100s off the sales price because of that, or maybe $1,000 or $2,000, it's not really worth driving a car that doesn't have paint on it. So make sure it's a really good condition car that you really do want a daily that has all the working, locks, window regulators, air conditioning, suspension. Everything should be working on the car. On a race car, it's okay because we're going to replace or delete a lot of that stuff. Air conditioning doesn't matter. Door locks don't matter. Doesn't matter if the windows go up a lot of the time. Doesn't matter if all the suspension components are worn out because we're just going to replace them. So it's very different. But I'm a race car person, so oftentimes I have the same mentality of go find the cheapest car that runs, Aaron. And that's not a great idea all the time. All right, that's basically it. I've told you the basics of how to buy and own cars. All the dream cars you've ever wanted, basically, that are at the end of your depreciation cycle, so that you can just blast through them and have a great time. I'm lucky because I have cheap tastes and my dream cars are actually obtainable. And I feel bad for people that just, They want Ferraris, they want Lamborghinis, they want all these cars that A, they're never going to be able to afford, but B, even if someone gave them to them for free, these cars have $6,000 sets of tires on them and $8,000 for, pads and rotors for the brakes. So they could never even drive these things hard if they wanted to. Kind of defeats the purpose of owning a cool car if you can't actually drive it hard. So I wish you luck. Go buy cars. Tell me what you get. I would actually really like to hear about any stories if you have cool stories about buying your dream car and then hearing about the depreciation, or if you got it and made money, or whatever cool story you have, tell me. And just because I know people are going to ask, I'm going to give you a quick abbreviated list of not all, but some of the cars I've owned. Some of the cars I've owned, I should also tell you if they were good or not. So I owned one Corvette. It broke a lot. Not the greatest purchase, but a fantastic car if it was more reliable. Most of them would be more reliable. Mine was kind of beat up. I had an Evo 8, bought it brand new on the lot in 2003. I had a ton of fun with that car. That's actually a weird car. They don't really depreciate, but it was really fun. I got a lot of stairs in it. It was kind of like a modified Civic. It was kind of odd, but it was a really fun car. I had 2 M5s. I had 3 M3s. I had about 9 total 3 Series BMWs, and another 5 Series that I daily drive right now, a 528i. 4 Jeeps, 8 Land Cruisers, 4 diesel trucks, 1 Mercedes C280. That Mercedes C280 was a great car. I put 80,000 miles on that thing in like a year working really hard once. Those 4 diesel trucks, by the way, man, the first 2 diesel trucks I had, I put 200,000 miles on each of them. Like myself, I drove that much. And my third one, I've only put like maybe 80,000 miles on. So I'm a lot slower on that one. I had 1 Mercedes 300D. It was probably officially the slowest car I've ever owned, but it drove everywhere and never broke down. Also had the cheapest tires of any car I've ever owned. I think they were like $30 each. I had a Dodge Viper. It felt like Walmart built a car. I had about 50 or so S chassis, so all kinds of 240SXs and Silvias, including an S15. I had 1Js, 2Js, LS1s, SR20s, KAs, and all kinds of engines. That was a lot of fun. I'm kind of a drift person, so I've had a lot of drift cars. And also, some of those cars, I might have only driven once. I might have bought them for parts or something, parted them out, done something like that. But I have had a lot of them. I've had at least 2 350Zs. I can't really remember at this point. I've had 1 370Z, 3 JZX90 I can think of, 7 JZX100, 1 R32 GTR, and 2 R32 GTSTs, 2 R33s, 1 R34, those are all Skylines in that list, 1 tiny van, I don't even remember the brand of that thing, but it's in the YouTube series, you can see it, 4 Mustangs, I actually just bought one yesterday, so I have a new Mustang in the fleet. I had a Jetta, I think the Jetta was the first new car I ever bought actually, which is kind of funny, way long time ago, I think 2003. I had an Audi A4, which is really weird. I had a Suzu Rodeo and I rolled it, which is kind of funny, and woke up unconscious in a creek. I had a Cressida that I got that was like a Pro 2 build. That was probably the fastest car I've ever owned that I can really think of. It was a little bit over 600 wheel with a 2J in it with a big Garrett turbo. I had an FD RX-7 that broke my heart. I had a Turbo FC RX-7, which I think I actually made money on. I don't remember. But it didn't break because I hardly drove it. It wasn't that comfortable, actually. I had a Turbo Miata that was actually really fun. I had a G35. I had a 335i BMW. I had an AE86, which was like super stripped out and stuff drift car, which is funny. I technically owned a Mark IV Supra, even though I never drove it. And I had a V8 Volvo wagon drift car. And I have had a lot of other cars. I can't really think of all of them because some of them I might have only owned for a few days or something or done something weird. But that's a short abbreviated list. It was pretty funny how many cars I have. It's pretty funny. I look through pictures and stuff, and it's kind of fun to look through pictures. I realize most of my cars I never even took pictures of because I'm not a big picture person. And that is all. Please go out, buy your dream car, enjoy life. Tell me about it. Bye.